most years, Parshas BaMidbar is the parsha we read the Shabbos before Shavuos. As we pointed out several times, this year is the anomaly, because this year is the year where there's an extra Shabbos in the winter, because it was a leap year and Rosh Hashanah fell out on a Thursday. So there's an extra Shabbos in the winter. As a result, we are ahead of ourselves by 1 week. So we're not reading the BaMidbar, the Shabbos before Shavuos, we're reading BaMidbar, the Shabbos before that. 2 Shabbos before Shavuos. But in a normal year, BaMidbar is the parasha before Shavuos. So there is an assumption that nothing is coincidental, that there is some connection between BaMidbar and Shavuos. The odd thing being that BaMidbar is a parasha which is inexplicable. It almost seems as if there is nothing of any eternal value in this parasha. I once read a very interesting series of articles about how libraries deal with outdated materials. And we think that libraries collect books, but the truth is that libraries devote a lot of energy and attention to disposing of books, because certain things become outdated. If you have old encyclopedias and old telephone books, etc., what are you going to do with them? Because after a while they have no value, so libraries have to dispose of them. And then there are space considerations. You just can't keep collecting. There's only a finite amount of space that you have. So after a point, you have to discard the outdated materials to bring in the new materials. So it's a real challenge, because libraries really not only have to focus on acquisitions, they have to focus on disposal of the things that don't seem to have lasting value. But Parshas BaMidbar almost seems like that. In other words, here we have census figures for the Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar. That might have been very important at the time, but now, how important is it that we know that when the encampment was established, this Shevet had this number of people, and this Shevet had this number of people, and that they camped in this configuration in the Midbar? It's all, at best, of historic interest. And perhaps not even that, because after all is said and done, we don't see any major philosophical, spiritual idea in these details. It just seems to be a census, a tabulation, an array of the machana, of the camp. So, number one, why does the Torah record it? Presumably everything that's recorded in the Torah is for posterity. And is there really any connection between this parsha and Shavuos? The Ramban says a very, very interesting thing, just as one of these things which almost is said by the way. He says that the machana, the configuration of the camp, was a carrying forward of the experience of Har Sinai. When the Jews received the Torah at Har Sinai, they were encamped around the mountain. And here we have the machana arranged in the same configuration, not around the mountain, of course, but rather around the Mishkan. And the Ramban says that the divine presence in the Mishkan, around which the Jews camped, is reminiscent of the divine presence that was on Har Sinai, around which the Jews camped. And therefore, what Parshas BaMidbar really is about is the carrying forward of the experience of Har Sinai. There we had the mountain in the center with the flames, the divine presence. The Jews were camped all around. That's what we have in the Mishkan. The Mishkan is the carrying forward of the experience of Har Sinai. That wherever the Jews were meant to go, they were to take the experience of Sinai with them. And again, this doesn't explain the wealth of detail, but at least in an overall sense, it gives us an idea of the significance of this parsha. This parsha is really a discussion of how to implement this goal of carrying forward the experience of Har Sinai. And therefore we understand its connection to Shavuos. Because what we're meant to do on Shavuos is exactly that. Shavuos is not really a commemoration of the giving of the Torah. It is an attempt to really carry the experience forward, to relive the experience, if you will. And therefore Parshas BaMidbar, which is exactly that, the attempt to carry the experience of Sinai forward, is certainly an appropriate parsha to read before the holiday of Shavuos. Tackling this theme in a little bit of more depth, there is something that the Torah tells us about the Machna, a very curious thing. The verse says, V'chanu b'nei Yisrael, that the b'nei Yisrael should camp, Ish al machaneu v'ish al diglo, every man in his camp, and every man close to his flag. Now there is an emphasis in this idea that every individual somehow finds his place within the scheme of the Machna. Which means that the Machna is not simply that each tribe, each shevet finds its place. Rather, each person within the shevet also has a place. Now the Torah doesn't go into this detail, but it seems that is what the verse is coming to tell us. Because it isn't just that the tribes were assigned places, but every individual within a shevet had an assigned place. That's implicit in the idea of Machana. And therefore it's not just that the shevet camped in its assigned place, but it's Ish al Machaneu, every person camped in his assigned place. V'ish al Digla, every person close to his flag. You see the difference? It's a very subtle thing. In other words, it's one thing to say that a shevet, a tribe, had a place. Right? The tribe has a place. But the individual members of the tribe, within that place, can camp wherever they want. Right? It's something else to say there's assigned encampments. That every family, every individual within a family, had an assigned place within the Machana. But the Torah, again, doesn't go into detail, doesn't list all the 600,000 men and say, okay, this person camps here, this person camps there. That would be impossible. But the pasuk does make a point that it was Ish al Machanei v'Ish al Diglo. Every person had a specific place. By the way, this doesn't simply mean that there's a geographic place. See, how do we understand the idea of the Machna? I think that the best mashal, the best analogy we could use is that of the organizational chart. You have an organization, there's a chart. You have boxes and lines and arrows that connect the boxes. Essentially, it's a graphic depiction of how the various organizations, boards, committees relate to one another, their functions, who's in charge, who's on top, who's below, etc. But the Machna essentially is the same thing. It's the organizational chart, if you will, of the Jewish people. Because we have the Mishkan in the center. Everything revolves around it. You have the Leviim camping close to the center. The Shvatim at the periphery. Each shevet has a place. The Shvatim are divided into 4 camps. Each camp has a major shevet, which obviously is the leader, 2 subsidiary Shvatim, and so on and so forth. Each group of 3 Shvatim apparently has some connection to one another, which is stronger than the connection they have to the other 9 Shvatim. It's not within the scope of our discussion tonight to work out exactly these relationships, but that's what the Machna is. And therefore, if it's now Ish al Machaneu, that means each person finds his place in this organizational chart. Each person plays a role. And this probably was also Al Pi Hashem. It was based on divine communication. But if you found yourself in a certain place within the Machana, this was a very strong message. This is your role, this is your connection, these are the people you're meant to work with, and so on and so forth. And it really brings out a very interesting thing that we read several weeks ago. In Parshas Emor, we had the story of the Macaulay, the person who cursed God. And if you remember the story, it says in Rashi that what was he upset about? So Rashi brings one opinion that he exited the court of Moshe Rabbeinu and he lost his case. What was his case? He wanted to be in the encampment of the tribe of Dan. Now he really wasn't entitled, because although his mother was from the tribe of Dan, his father was an Egyptian. So he pitched his tent in the encampment of Dan, and they told him, you don't belong here. So he claimed, I do belong here. That's where my mother is from. I don't have a Jewish father. So they said, okay, let's go to Moshe Rabbeinu's court. And Moshe Rabbeinu ruled, no, you have no right to pitch your tent here. You're not a member of Shevet Dan. So he was very upset, and that led him to curse God, commit blasphemy. But let's think about it for a moment. What was bothering him? Was it a simple question of not having a place to pitch his tent? We know that the Jews were accompanied by an Erev Rav, by a multitude of converts, who also didn't belong to any Shevet. And undoubtedly, where was their encampment? Their encampment was further out in the periphery. So this fellow certainly would have had a place, would have had neighbors, he wouldn't have been living in isolation. Because what is really bothering him? His lack of place isn't a question of not having a place to pitch his tent. His lack of place is that he wants to belong to a Shevet. He wants to be involved in the activity of a Shevet, in the mission of the Shevet. And he's left out of that. In other words, his being sent to the periphery doesn't simply mean that he has a longer walk to get to the Mishkan. It means that his role within the structure of Klal Yisrael is marginal. And that's very, very painful. But this is what the idea of the Machane is. Ish al Machane of Ish al Diglo. Every person finding his place in the divine scheme. And this reminds me of a very interesting Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that we have to know. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos in the first parak quotes some of the great teachings of Hillel. And one of them is this, that in the Ein Ani Mili, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? Uchashani la'atzmi, if I am for myself, Mo'ani, what am I? V'im lo yachshav, and if not now, amos I when. Now it's very surprising that the Rishonim, Bartanura, Rabbeinu Yonah, etc., learned this Mishnah in a very unusual way. And this is the generally accepted interpretation of this Mishnah until fairly recently. I think fairly recently the assumption is the Mishnah means something else. But the classic interpretation goes like this, that if I do not motivate myself, no one else can motivate me. That's an Ein Ani Mili. If I do not motivate myself, who will motivate me? There's many people who are unmotivated point fingers. And my parents didn't inspire me, my teachers didn't inspire me, the rabbi's sermon was boring, it's all their fault. But the truth is, it's not that way. That if you are unmotivated, it's your responsibility. You have to motivate yourself. So if I don't motivate myself, Mili, who's going to motivate me? You have to motivate yourself. Now, Kishani la'atzmi, and Rabbeinu Yonah understands this way, but even if I do motivate myself, let's say I accept that responsibility and I motivate myself, Mohani, what am I? Meaning, what can I hope to accomplish on the basis of that self-motivation? Anything that I could motivate myself to do is far, far, far from what I really am obligated to do. So that's Kashani La'atzmi, that even if I do motivate myself, what percentage of expectations do I meet? That's the interpretation, the classic interpretation. There is an interpretation nowadays, I think if you'd ask any man on the street the meaning of this Mishnah, he would give you the following interpretation. I was looking to see what the pedigree of this interpretation is. Like, where did it come from? And it really is an interpretation that the earliest source I was able to find for it was the Chidushi Arim, the first Ger Rebbe. And this is printed in the Sefer called Siach Sarfei Kodesh, which is a collection of Hasidic sayings from the first Ger Rebbe. Apparently this interpretation has become so widely accepted that as soon as you hear it, you'll assume that this, of course, is what the Mishnah must have meant. I think nowadays most people assume this is what the Mishnah meant, but surprisingly, it's not understood that way in any of the classic commentators. But this is how the Chidushim understood it. And it's interesting to know, let's mention as an aside, that the Sfas Emes, who was the grandson of the Chidushi Arim, when he refers to this Mishnah, never explains the Mishnah. He just writes that the interpretation of my grandfather is well known. It was apparently so well known that there wasn't any need for him to even explain it. He just referred to it that the interpretation of the Chidushim was well known. And the Chidushim said like this. He said that every person is sent to the world to do something unique. He has a unique role to play in the world. If you put it in mystical language, there's a tikkun, there's a rectification, a element to prepare to the world that this person and only this person can affect. And therefore he says, "In ein ani li," if I don't do my unique tachlis, my unique objective, mili, who will do it for me? In other words, we have to understand in life, what I am put here to do isn't that, okay, this is my job, but if I don't do it, someone else will do it. In life, if I don't do it, it will not be done. Because this is the task that was given to me. No one else is given the opportunity and the tools with which to do it. So if I do it, it's done. If I don't do it, it will never be done. It'll be left undone. And that's the idea. If I am not for myself, if I don't do what I was sent to this world to do, then who will do it? And that's a rhetorical question. The answer is nobody will do it. Now the question is, though, that what is that unique role I am meant to play? So one might think, well, perhaps I'm sent to this world to produce a special work of art, or to write a special piece of literature, or to achieve a madrega, a level of piety or closeness to God. The answer is no. What I am sent to do is not something which I do for myself. What I am sent to do is something which affects the entire Jewish people. My role is not to do something for myself in this world. The mission I was sent to is uniquely my mission, but it is a mission which is to play a role within the life of the nation. So this is a very subtle point. Again, my mission is uniquely mine. It is very personal. It is very specific to me. But it's not something which I do in isolation. My job is to do something within the structure of Klal Yisrael, for Klal Yisrael. So if I decide to live as a hermit, some isolated place, to meditate, reflect, to attain some level of intimacy and bonding with God, that's not it. That's not what I was meant to do. I was meant to do something that would impact and affect the klal, the collective. And that's the second half of the Mishnah. But if what I do is just for myself, then Moani, what am I? I've missed the entire objective. My mission is not to do something for myself. My mission is to do something for the cloud, for the world. So therefore, again, in the Ein Anili, if I'm not for myself, if I don't do my job, then Mili, who's going to do it? No one else can do it. But if I make a mistake and I assume that that job is to do something for myself, then what am I? And furthermore, you have to know that this mission is not a single mission. There are a series of missions. Every moment has its mission. So it's not like something which, okay, I don't do it today, I'll do it tomorrow. If I didn't do today's job today, and I push it off to tomorrow, tomorrow's job will be undone. If I push tomorrow's job off to the day after, that day's job will be undone. And therefore, if not now, when? I can't push it off till tomorrow, because tomorrow has a different task that has to be done. Meaning that my life is not a single challenge, a single mission. Because every moment of my life has a unique tikkun. And therefore, if I don't do today's job, I don't do this moment's job now, when will I do it? Can't do it tomorrow, can't do it even an hour from now. Because an hour from now, there's the job for the next hour. Now, I have to mention, by the way, that this is the kind of thing that for us sounds very, very theoretical. You know, such a diktuk, such a precision in terms of use of time. You know, that I have to do it now, I can't push it off till tomorrow, I can't push it off even for an hour, because every moment has its own. But you should know that the Gera Rebbes were renowned for their precision in terms of use of time. It's said that the Sfas Emes had 70 different starim, 70 different learning sessions over the course of a day. There were 70 different things they learned in the course of a day.
Wow.
You know, this you learned for 5 minutes, this you learned for 3 minutes, this you learned for 4 minutes, etc., etc., etc. And the story is told of one of the Rebbes, the Imri Emes, that he had a shiur with his grandchildren. He learned with his grandchildren a certain time during the day. And one of his grandchildren came and told him that the time was inconvenient, he had to be somewhere else. He wouldn't be able to come to the daily shiur. So he told him, okay, so I'll make a special session with you. I come 6 minutes before 11 at night, and we will learn for 6 minutes.
6 minutes.
From 6 minutes to 11 to 11 o'clock. And this started about a few weeks after Sukkot, and by Purim, they learned the entire Maseches Megillah, learning 6 minutes a day. That was a use of time. You know, a Shabbos Seudah, a Shabbos meal, took exactly, I think it was 27 minutes. Every week, exactly.
Exactly.
Same amount of time, 27 minutes, including all the Zmiras. You know, they were very fast, very...
Yeah.
They were masters of time. And therefore, for one of these Rebbes to say the idea, if not now when, really means something. But I think that this Mishnah really sums up the idea of the Parsha. The idea of Ish al Machaneu, Ish al Digo. Each person has a place within the camp, means that each person has a role that he plays, but not a role that he plays as an individual, a role that he plays as part of the collective. And that's this idea, that it may not nili mili, it's hinted in a very interesting thing in the parsha. It says that when Moshe counted the Jews for the census, it says they were counted b'mispar shemos, by the number of names. The names were counted by number. So what is the idea of counting names? So the Sforno says a very interesting thing. The Sforno says that the name of a person really symbolizes his uniqueness. Because every person has a name. You have a big crowd of people. So it looks like it's just a large mass. But each individual has a name. The name symbolizes your uniqueness, that which differentiates you from everybody else. And therefore, when Moshe counted them, it wasn't simply counting numbers. It was Moshe Rabbeinu relating to each as an individual. And we know the Ramban tells us that in this process of counting, it says, Vayisyaldu, each person came and gave an accounting of his genealogy. And the Ramban explains that every person came to Moshe Rabbeinu, presented himself, he said, this is who I am, this is who my fathers were. Moshe would bless them. Whereas it wasn't like the Canadian census, you get mail forms in the mail and you tabulate with some computer. It was very personal. Every person presented himself to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to him. Moshe Rabbeinu met him, got to know him. There was a personal contact. And that's symbolized by the idea of shemos. But on the other hand, it's hard to understand this expression, number of names. There's nothing more personal than a name. There's nothing more impersonal than a number. So what is the idea of mispar shemos? A counting of names. The answer is exactly this, that it's true every person is an individual, but the role he plays as an individual is meant to be within the collective. And that is symbolized by the idea of mispar shemos. You are a number, but you are a name. Because your unique role is not something which you perform in isolation, it's something you perform within the collective. So at the same time that you are a shame, you are a mispar. At the same time you are a name, meaning you are a unique individual, you are a number, part of a collective, part of a number. And maybe that's really the lesson of Parshas BaMidbar. Now the Medrash says that the Jews yearned for the Machana and for the Degolim. They desired this. Because this scheme was not just God imposing his vision on the Jewish people. The Jews requested it, they wanted it, they desired it, and God acquiesced. So the question is, why did the Jews desire it? What is so desirous of these encampments? So the Medrash says an amazing thing. The Medrash says that when the Jews stood at Har Sinai and they had a prophetic experience, the Jews saw the angels encamped in this type of array. That the angels were encamped around the mountain with flags, and the Jews desired this same thing, and therefore God acquiesced and gave them the Machana. So what is this idea that the angels had this Machana and the Jews wanted the same thing as the angels had? So the Sfasema says a very interesting thing, that as we explained, the Machana symbolizes the organizational chart of the Jewish people, with every individual finding his place. The Malachim, the angels, organize themselves into a Machana. Why? Because each angel has that much self-awareness. He's aware of what his purpose is. He understands his role. And therefore, since the angel understands his own role, he understands how he relates to every other Malach within the scheme. So the Malachim, because of their self-awareness, arranged themselves into the Machana. When the Jews saw this, it was a tremendous yearning. Who would not want to know what his place is, what his role is, what he's meant to do? I think there's nothing that people would want to know more than that. Like, how do I fit into the divine scheme? So they wanted a Machana. For the Jews, the Machana would function in the exact opposite way. It's not that knowing their purpose, they were able to configure themselves into the Machana. Like, from the Machana, they would be able to figure out what their purpose is. It's almost, by analogy, the relationship of a blueprint to a building. In other words, when you build a building, you have a blueprint, and this is the plan for the building. But sometimes it works the opposite way. Sometimes you have a building, and you need to make modifications, etc., and you don't have blueprints for the building. So you hire a company which comes, and the company surveys the building, and they produce a set of plans from the building. So sometimes the building is an analog of the plans, sometimes the plans are an analog of the building. Right? That's the relationship of the individual to the machna. In the case of the malachim, having that understanding, that self-awareness, organize themselves into a machna. For the Jews, from the machna, they were meant to come to this self-awareness. But the desire for it is something which is very understandable. Of course, everyone would like to know what his role is, what his purpose is. I mean, I wish I had $1 for every person who came to me and said, what's my mission in this world? I've heard it many times. Everyone wonders. And unfortunately, who's to know? But the Jews, through the vehicle of the Machana, were able to know their place to a greater extent than we can know. And that's why they yearned for it, and they wanted it very, very much. We, of course, have to try to the extent that we can to find our place. Now, how do we do that? We do that by introspection. We reflect on ourselves. What talents have we been given? What opportunities have we been given? What do we find appealing? That's certainly a part of it. But if God has given you a leaning toward a certain mitzvah, toward a certain function, then that might be a divine message, that this is the area into which you're meant to work. Now, there's a famous medrash which says, on the verse, Kaved es Hashem me'hoincha, it says in Mishnah, you should honor God from your wealth. So the medrash says, Kaved es Hashem migroincha. Play on words. You should honor Hashem with your throat. That if a person has a singing voice, he should assume that perhaps his mission is to somehow serve God with a singing voice. But tonight, I don't particularly feel that's my job, so I'm not going to sing. But a person has to be aware of his talents and his skills, his endowments, and from that he understands what he's going to do in this world. I'll mention that one aspect of this may be related to the holiday that we just experienced, Lag BaOmer. But Lag BaOmer is a holiday for several reasons. One is that it is the day that the plague, which took away the 24,000 students to Rabbi Yeshiva, ended. The Gemara tells us that the reason the plague took place is lo nohagu kavod ze lezeh. They did not give honor to one another, and the plague ended Lag BaOmer. The second reason why this is a celebration is because it's the Hilula, it's the celebration of the passing of Reb Shimon bar Yochai. Now, at first glance, it's very strange that we should celebrate a person's passing. But the Zohar tells us that when a tzaddik leaves the world, this is when he achieves his highest level, and this is when he transmits his greatest teachings. And the Zohar says that the teachings that Reb Shimon bar Yochai taught on the day of his death were the loftiest, the deepest secrets of the Kabbalah, and that was his parting gift to us, and therefore that day is a day of celebration. The question is, are the two related? Is there some connection between Reb Shimon bar Yochai and the ending of the plague? And I think there is. I don't want to talk about it at length. Time is short. But let's understand it this way. Reb Shimon bar Yochai revealed the deepest secrets of the Torah, which are the Kabbalah. As we know that Torah is understood on many levels. The most basic level is called Pshat. Pshat. That's one level. Then there's a level called Remez. Right? Remez is symbolism, where the people or the objects that are discussed in a verse are treated as symbols of something else. That's called Remez. Then there's Drush. Drush is a method of interpretation which takes the words, phrases, out of their general context and interprets them in their own right. So in a way which is farther removed from the simple interpretation of the verse, because it removes context. Now, one might say, what gives us license to do that? The answer is that God composed the Torah in such a way that there are lessons which are understood within context, and furthermore, there are further lessons that each phrase generates divorced from its context. It sounds like an odd thing, but the idea is that Torah is multi-leveled, and you have esoteric messages that are contained in the Torah. The deepest level is called Sod. Sod really means the idea as they emerge from Kabbalah, the hidden learning. And together, these four levels, Pshat, Remez, Drush, Sod, form an acronym called Pardes. Pardes. Pardes means the orchard, but it's an acronym for Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. So some people deny the idea of Sod. There is no mystical idea that underlies the Torah. All there is at best, Pshat, Remez, and Drush. So it's said over that if a person believes that all there is Pshat, Remez, and Drush, Pei, Reish, Daled, he is a parrot. A parrot is a mule. In Yiddish, a ferret is a horse. But in Hebrew, a parrot is a mule. You're worse than a donkey. A mule is worse than a donkey. See, a donkey at least may be unintelligent, but at least it is fertile. You can have further offspring. A mule doesn't even have that. A mule is sterile. So if a person doesn't believe in Pardes, because he cuts off the Sod, he's a parrot, he's a mule. There is this deeper level. And this deeper level was concealed and was brought to the world, was revealed through Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who wrote the Sefer HaZohar. He revealed the secrets of Torah. And that's why one of the Ramazim, one of the hints that is cited for the day of Lag BaOmer is from a verse in Tehillim, which says, Gal Einai, uncover my eyes, Va'abita niflos miTorasecha, and I'll see wonders from your Torah. So Gal, open my eyes, Gal is Lag. Let's reverse it. And that's the reference to Lag BaOmer. Gal Einai, reveal open my eyes. But you have to know that just like in Torah, there is the Pshat, there is the basic understanding, then there's the deep understanding of Sod. Likewise, when you study a human being, whether it's yourself, whether it's another person, there are also at various levels at which you understand the person. There is the Pshat of a person, the way the person presents himself superficially. There's also the Sod. There's the deeper meaning of the person. And sometimes you run into a person who you think is a very, very simple person. You know, not an outstanding scholar, not an outstanding tzaddik. Right? You dig a little bit deeper beneath the surface, and you find greatness there. That means on the level of Pshat, on the simple level, there's not much to see. On the level of Sod, when you delve into the secret of the person, then you discover there's an amazing thing. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai gave us the eyes, as he taught us to look beneath the surface, but not to satisfy oneself with a superficial way of looking at things, but to look deeper, because there is something to be discovered. And not only when we learn Psukim and Chumash, we find these deep secrets. When we study people, we find these deep secrets. I'll tell you an amazing thing. The Torah brings a remez, brings a hint that he gives hints for the days of the week in which various holidays fall. He points out that Purim and the following Lag BaOmer always fall on the same day of the week. And the simon for this, the way to remember this, is the word plag. Plag is the Aramaic word which means half, plag. And it hints to Purim and Lag BaOmer. And of course, you think about it for a second. Last Purim fell out Motzei Shabbos, and this year as well, Lag BaOmer fell out Motzei Shabbos. It always works that way. The way the calendar is set up, the calendar is fixed. The lengths of the months are fixed. So Purim and the following Lag BaOmer always fall out on the same day of the week. So what's the connection of Purim to Lag BaOmer? Well, we know that Purim also is a day where the secrets about people are revealed. Because the pasuk tells us, "Mishnichnas yayin yatzaso." The wine comes in, the secrets come out. So Purim is also a day that deep secrets about people are revealed. But there's a basic difference in the two. By analogy, let's say you have a very deep pit. And in the bottom of the pit, you have something very valuable. And you want to see it. Or better. But at the bottom of the ocean, you have a shipwreck. The Titanic is the bottom of the ocean. So you want to see what's there. So there are two ways to tackle this. One way is to bring the ship up to the surface. The other way is to dive down to see what's there. So likewise, if you want to know the soul of a person, there are deep secrets. So there are two possibilities. One possibility is you can bring the secrets closer to the surface. That's what we do in Purim. The wine goes in, the secrets that previously were very, very deep are brought closer to the surface. Lag BaOmer also reveals the secrets, but in a different way. Lag BaOmer gives us the eyes, the tools, the instruments with which to delve deeply and see the things deep, deep down. So both of them relate to the revelation of secrets, but in a different manner. Purim, the secrets are brought closer to the surface. Lag BaOmer enables us to delve more deeply. Now, lest you think this is just something theoretical, if you recall the story of Lag BaOmer, which very interestingly is in the Gemara Masechah Shabbos on Daf Lamed Gimel. This way you'll never forget where it is. It's on Daf Lamed Gimel. It tells the story of Rosh Yochai. Rosh Yochai was running away from the Romans. He was hiding from the Romans. And he lived in a cave for 12 years with his son. So it was Eliezer, and they studied Torah from Eliyahu and Avi in the cave for 12 years. And they were sustained miraculously. And they had a stream of water, and they had a carob tree, and that's what they ate, and that's what they drank. And they didn't have to work for a living. So they came out of the cave, and they, in the basic personal experience, came to the conclusion that why should anyone have to work for a living? Why should anyone plant, plow, farm? Devote your life to Torah study, and you'll be sustained in a miraculous way. So it says they came and they saw people planting, plowing, doing agricultural work, farm work. They couldn't believe it. So it says wherever they looked, the place burst into flames.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it says. It burst into flames. They couldn't understand. What are you doing? What are you wasting your life doing this type of work? So a heavenly voice came out and said, "You want to destroy my world? Go back to the cave." So he went back to the cave. So they were there another 12 months, and after 12 months, they said to themselves, "Listen, even the biggest Rishoyim, even the most wicked people, only stay in Gehenna for 12 months. So after 12 months longer, we should be able to get out." So they left the cave. So the Gemara says that wherever Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon looked, wherever the sun looked, still burst into flames. When Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai looked, the place was healed. The fire subsided. So apparently, in that extra year, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai came to a higher or a deeper level of understanding, which justified the people doing farm work. So after 12 years, he couldn't tolerate it, but after the 13th year, he understood it. So, what did he come to understand? So the Gemara continues and tells the story like this: that there was a Jew who was running with 2 bundles of hadassim, 2 bundles of myrtle in his hand. Well, these are fragrant branches. So they asked him, "Where are you running?" So he says, "This is for Shabbos. It's nice to have pleasant fragrances in the house, like we have flowers." So why 2? So he says, one corresponds to Zohar, and one corresponds to Shomer. On Shabbos, there's the twofold idea, to remember the Shabbos and to guard the Shabbos. So therefore he has 2 bundles. Let's Same reason we have 2 candles. So Shimon Bar Yochai said to his son, you see how precious mitzvahs are to them? And then it says, and then Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon was settled. What's really going on is this, that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai came to understand that even in a simple Jew, there's greatness. Now you see this Jew running in the street. This probably was not a great rabbi or a great tzaddik or a great Torah scholar. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was able to see in this person something special. This is a person who respected mitzvahs, who respected Shabbos, who honored Shabbos. And you see how beloved mitzvahs are, even by seemingly simple Jews. And then Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon was settled. It was after 12 years in the cave, they had no tolerance, no understanding of the depth that is within even seemingly simple Jews. After one more year of introspection, Rabbi Shimon was able to understand. But this is the idea. The idea is that Lag BaMidbar enables us to see greatness. And we have to see the greatness in other people. And this really is the connection to the story of Rosh and the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. The Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva died. The Gemara says, Shlo noagu kavod zeh lezeh. They didn't give honor to one another. Why didn't they give honor to one another? Remember, they had 24,000 people. They were colleagues. They were all in the same yeshiva. They didn't recognize the uniqueness of one another. Because after all said and done, that's what kavod is. Honor means the acknowledgement, the recognition of that which makes another person unique. They didn't recognize that. They didn't recognize that. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai gives us the tools to recognize it. By looking beneath the surface, not at the simple, superficial way the person presents himself, but looking at the person, at his background, at everything which is concealed. You come to understand what is truly unique. Now there's kavod, now there's honor. Every person has something which is honorable and something respectable about him. It might not be on the surface. On the surface you might seem to be like just one of the 24,000. But if I dig deeper, I recognize what's special about you. And it's an interesting thing that this not only pertains to other people, it pertains to ourselves as well. There's a remez, there's a hint which is brought in Sefer Chasidus. There's a verse which says, "Mi bisari echze elokach," from my flesh I can perceive godliness. Literally means you look at yourself, you look at the human body, you see a divine work. But it says, "Mi bisari," from my flesh I can perceive godliness. Bisari, Beis Shin Reish Yud, is an acronym for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Right? The Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai gave us the ability to see godliness within ourselves. Because he gave us the tools to see things beneath the superficial level, to see the soul, the secret of every person. And I think that relates to all that we've talked about tonight. We've talked about tonight the idea of every person having a unique mission, every person finding his place in the scheme. How difficult that is. In those days they had the Machana, and the Machana was the organizational chart. It told everyone what his place is, what his role is. We don't have the Machana. But we have Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, because we have the tools that he bequeathed us to look a bit deeper. So one might say, it has to be a trained mystic. You don't have to be a trained mystic. You just have to be willing to take a second look. Not to jump to conclusions. Not to suffice with a superficial blink. But to really look and think, what is special about that person? What is unique about that person? And we often discover that even people that are on the first glance, fairly simple people, really, in fact, are people that are genuinely great. and are deserving of our respect and our honor. Okay, let's hold here.